we come to one of my favourite passages. This, I think, is my kind of core passage on the kind of how to live the kingdom business life. Okay, so this passage is often called the wife of noble character. But what it is for me, and whenever I preach on this, I call this the perfect work-life-love balance. So this passage describes the absolutely perfect life in business. So if you're ever wanting to kind of think through the stages that your life might go through if you are going to prosper in business, this passage describes it brilliantly. And it gives some really interesting insights into how one goes about building a truly fruitful career in business. So we're just going to go through it verse by verse and sort of unpack it as we go. So it's the last chapter of Proverbs, so we don't have to turn back very far from where we were. And there's some sort of really interesting insights that can be found in this. So if we can, there's 31 verses here, so everyone can read a verse, which would be good. So if we can, let's start. Can we start here, and we will sort of make our way around the room, I think there's probably roughly 31 of us, so we'll get to the end. So if we just read one verse, and then we'll discuss that verse and see what it reveals, and then we'll go on to the next verse. So it starts at verse 10. Proverbs 31, verse 10. Okay, so at the very beginning, some interesting things. The first observation is, we're talking here about the wife, which in that culture is kind of interesting. So we're talking here not just about a wife, but we're talking about a wife of noble character. So the absolute starting point of this entire journey, if you like, our first observation, is character. We talked about this yesterday, that if you had a choice between strategy and character, choose character. Character will take you further than strategy. Okay, so this is a woman of character. And it also says she is worth far more than rubies. So a person of character is worth far more than cash itself. And we're going to see why. We're going to see why she's worth more than something of financial value. Because there's a big difference between a pot of money and someone who, over their lifetime, can do a whole lot of things. So people are worth more than cash, and particularly people of character. If you find someone of character who wants to work with you, they are gold dust. They are worth more than rubies to you. Don't ever substitute cash for people, good people, that is. Yeah, so good people is one of the primary things, and we talked about this yesterday. One of the key things you have to do to establish a great business is get good people around you. Recognize how valuable people are. They are incredibly valuable. Okay, verse 11. Okay, so every great business begins with a very simple thing. It's the most important kind of central aspect of all business, trust. If you don't have trust from your customers, and you don't have trust between you and your staff, if you don't trust your staff and your customers don't trust you, you will just never get any business. If people don't trust in the quality of your product, so I don't know, I'm eating those nuts, those lovely nuts I was given earlier with the chocolate on, but if actually I got to the second half of each packet and the quality plummeted, and all of I discovered that actually you'd filled the top half of each packet with really good stuff, but the bottom half was full of the rotten stuff, well, yeah, you'd have sold me the first packet, but you're never going to sell me any other packets. Yeah? So there's this sense of trust is absolutely essential. And we see here that this husband has full confidence in my version. He has full trust in her. So we all also begin our business ventures because people have given us an opportunity. They've said, my first project, before I'd done any projects, someone had to say, I'm going to take a chance on you. I trust you. I trust you based on your character. You've got no track record, but your character seems good. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to give you your first project. Now I've got a portfolio. It's easier to trust me now because I have a track record. But it begins with something based on a trust in the person. And it says that her husband lacks nothing of value. We're about to see why. But this husband now, because he's kind of released his wife into her calling. And we're about to see what her calling looks like. But he's releasing her into her calling. And as a result of this, he's going to lack nothing of value. Okay, so verse 12. Okay, so many people, because as we get into this passage, you're going to see that her life is entirely a life in business. Okay, but what we're seeing here is that this is a life's work, and it does no harm. Now, many people think of business as the opposite of that. They see business as something that exploits people. They see it as something that takes from the countryside and takes from the land. They see it as something that does nothing other than exploit the world for a few people's advantage. Okay, so the biblical model that she's about to demonstrate is one of no harm. It's back into this idea of care. Okay, so it's a really important context to this whole thing. It's based on trust, and it does no harm. And it's really important for you to know, if you go into business and you do it God's way, you are not doing harm to the world, you're bringing a blessing. Too many people have done harm and given business a bad name. I mean, the reputation of business in the West at the moment is extremely low. The credit crunch, as it was called, the economic crashes of 2008, brought the whole of the business world into huge disrepute, particularly the banking sector. Basically, it was revealed that people were untrustworthy, they were basically stealing to their own advantage, they were exploiting people, and the culture of business was in disrepute. But this lady is about to demonstrate that she can bring good, not harm, all the days of her life. Okay, so that's, if you like, the context. Now in verse 13, we begin to see the business begins. So how does she start her business? Okay, so we see that she goes out and gets the wool and the flax, if you like, raw materials of making cloth, of making clothing. And it says she works with eager hands. Now this is back to my passion point. My first point around how to start a great business is to be passionate about it. She doesn't just work with her hands, she's eager. This is someone who's passionate about her business. So right at the very beginning, she's not reluctant. It doesn't say she selects wool and flax and reluctantly goes to work. Or she selects wool and flax and as slowly and lethargically as possible, with minimum effort, gets the business done. You know, there's none of that. This is eager. And it's really important that I come back to passion. If you're not eager for your business, then you're probably in the wrong business. Don't waste your life doing something you're not passionate about. Don't waste your life doing something you're not eager to get on with it. If you don't wake up on a Monday morning with some level of eagerness, then you're probably in the wrong business. God has something for you to be passionate about. And we all have Monday mornings, don't get me wrong, where we wake up and go, I wish it was still Sunday. But if there's never a moment in your day where you find some eagerness to get the task done, you know, reflect on why. Reflect on what you can do to make that different. Okay, so verse 14. Sorry, and first of all, and say here as well, she's in the clothing. So, but what she's doing here is starting at the bottom of the food chain. So there's a kind of starting small. Here is a lady working with her hands. She's not employing people. It's just the one. And she's doing the most basic thing in the industry. So if this is the clothes industry, she's at the very bottom. She's literally just selecting wool and flax. She's not even making cloth yet. She's just making the basic ingredient of what she's about to make. So she's just weaving the stuff. And she's doing it by hand, which means she's got no equipment yet. This is really basic cottage industry. She's working, you know, at the lowest level in society. But she's started. Okay, verse 14. Okay, so we're about to see that she's got some real savvy. This is someone who recognises that to get the best price, you don't just go to the local market. If you want to be in business, you've got to get the cost of supply down. At every level, you've got to bring your costs down. And she recognises that, and we're about to see, this is in the context of her home life. She goes to the merchants. What does it say? She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She doesn't just go to the kind of local store where the prices are high. She seeks out and may have to go some distance to get the best deal. There's a kind of business savvy. So this is someone who kind of gets some of the principles of how to make a prosperous business. So she's savvy. Okay. Verse 15. I love, did that use the word minions?
Minions.
Oh, right, sorry, I thought it was minions, which actually is quite a good interpretation. Minions would actually be a good word to put in there. Okay, so this is really important. Two things are going on here. She gets up early. She works hard. This is not someone who's going to succeed in this story because they put their feet up and have had the backing of their husband, who's basically set them up with a really easy business that they can just start running from day one. This is not someone who's had the golden spoon, as we say, given to them. Massive head start. All they've got is their husband's confidence. That's it. They don't have any other resources. But what she does is she gets up early, so she works hard. She's committed. And really interestingly, she doesn't neglect her primary responsibilities. There's a pecking order in terms of our ministry responsibilities. And as I said yesterday, family, we're all in ministry. We all have to respond, or so maybe it was this morning. We all have this responsibility to look after our family responsibilities and never get the sequence wrong. The second you start putting your work above your family, you're beginning to get in trouble. So family, she puts family first, and it's right here at the beginning. She's still just as busy, as she has just as much savvy about her family. Her gift of business awareness, she applies in the context of her home. It's probably why her husband has great confidence in her. He's seen that even with buying food, she goes and finds the best deal and looks at where the best deals are to be had. But the key thing is she provides for her family and portions for her servant girls. So she's looking after her household. That, in a sense, is her core motivation. And the primary purpose of your business is to provide for your family. I hope that you'll prosper beyond that you'll get a surplus beyond your own needs. But let's not forget that the primary purpose is just to meet the needs of your own family. So we begin with something quite humble, meeting the needs of her own family. Right, now we start to see another aspect of how savvy she is. So, verse 16. Okay, so this is someone who's quite ambitious. They've seen a vineyard and they've decided that they want to buy that vineyard. Now, the first thing I would say that's really important here, she's a patient lady. She doesn't go out and get a huge loan from the bank, get herself into a huge amount of debt, have huge amounts of interest payments for the rest of her life. She takes the time to save up the money to buy the vineyard. So she is patient. Many businesses try to grow fast, but they then end up being constantly forever under the burden of debt, and they never break free. Now, debt may be a necessary part of expanding your business, but be very cautious about getting into debt to expand your business. And yes, you run those numbers properly, like I was talking about yesterday, you will not necessarily ever break free. And you can find what happens is, it's this sort of compound interest thing. But what happens is that your business may start small and start slowly. But if this is two businesses, okay, this is this lady's business. It's just growing using compound interest. Just, if you like, slow growth. That might be 3% annual growth, but it still ends up here. Another person, they go out and they buy a machine, and their production increases massively on day one. And they're up here somewhere. And they are able to, and they rise, but the problem is, for every rise, they go back with debt. And they rise and go back with debt. And they rise and go back with debt. And what happens is, they may look like they were ahead, but there's no growth. Take the long view. You know, the curve of my business is exactly that curve. We've never borrowed 1 penny. And I know that, and there are, you must never underestimate the backward step. 2 steps forward, 1 step back is not a great growth program. So just be very wary. And the Bible demonstrates here, she takes time. And actually what effectively this is saying is that she waited till here, then used some of her money to buy a machine, increase production, and ended up here. Now that's kind of what we're about to see. But what she does here is something very clever. She's put her family first in terms of her finances by buying them food. Now we see that she takes the longer term view. So the second thing she does is provide for her family's future. So planting a vineyard is an incredibly clever thing to do, because in my understanding, a vineyard takes about 8 years before you get any significant harvest off it. So it's quite a slow thing. But a good vineyard, well tended, will go on forever. You know, basically, it's one of those things, it's a bit like olive trees. They just kind of go on and on and on. So a well-tended vineyard is a lifetime, if not multiple generations worth of future income. So the second thing she does, having met her current needs, today's bread, is make sensible financial decisions about the long-term future. She buys an income stream. Most of us spend our money on things that depreciate in value. The really clever people spend money things that appreciate in value, that go up in value over time and generate a dividend income. So this in a sense is like taking on an investment which is going to generate some return every year. But she has to wait 8 years for this return, and she spent however many years saving up the money. This is not someone who's in a hurry, but boy is her family going to be well provided for generations to come. She's taking the long view. So, next we see verse 17. Okay, no escaping it, we're back at hard work again. Okay, it's twice now already in this passage we've talked about hard work. She's diligent, she's eager, she works hard with her hands, and she's still, and it says her arms are strong for her task. What that tells me is she's got fitter, she's got better, she's better at this job. She's still doing the same thing. She's working with her hands, taking flax and making the base material for clothing, etc., for cloth. But she's stronger at it. Okay, so the more you do it, the more you practice it, the more you will get better at it. And then see what comes next. Verse 18. Okay, so that hard work, combined with experience and expertise, now has got her to the point where her work is profitable. But not just her work, it says her trading is profitable. Trading, to me, implies that ability to do business. She's wheeling and dealing. She's taking her product, finding the best market for it, and she's starting to make a profit. So she's working smart as well as working hard. If you remember my presentation yesterday, 2 different ways to make a profit: work smart or work hard. She's doing both of those things, and it is profitable. And I would suggest that this profitability is a surplus over and above the provision for her family, including saving up for that field. Real profit is not the money left over to pay for food. That's just breaking even. Profit is when you've got a surplus over and above that. That's a really profitable business. So if all your business does is meet your own financial needs and even your tithe, and that's about it, then that's not really a profitable business. That's just a break-even business. Okay? So she's now properly profitable. And despite the fact that she's now reached what she might have thought as her dream, she doesn't just stop at that point and give up and put her feet up. She does not, at this point, do what the man who stored up in barns did. She does not stop and go, now my life's good, I'm going to take it easy. In fact, she just keeps working even harder. She knows when you're profitable, that's the time, what do they say? When the sun shines, make hay. You know, don't give up when the going's good. That's not the time to step back. That's the time to press in and take it to the next level. So we see that she takes it to the next level. What does she do next? 19. Okay, so she's now bought some equipment. She's bought some machinery. She was making by hand. That must have been really slow and tedious. That must have been really quite low levels of production. She's now got herself the distaff and the spindle. So now she has a machine to make the produce. She's increasing production. So she has taken some of that profit, I would suggest, and reinvested it back in the business. This is really important. She invests in the business before she gives to the poor. Because we're about to see that she has not yet given anything to the poor. We're about to see that she will, but look at the sequence. Her family, her family's future, the long-term sustainability and profitability of her business, which without that, she can never give anything away, and then we will see she moves into giving to the poor. So now that she's got a growing business and she's invested back in her business, any surplus from here on is true overflowing surplus. So what happens in verse 20? Great. She gets there, but look how long it's taken her to get to that place. You know, it's really, really good that we have a heart of generosity, but we're called to be shrewd, not just naive and generous. There is a wisdom in recognizing that if your calling is business, your ability to fulfill that calling requires your business to prosper. And if all you do is make a profit and then give it all away, like the lady who killed the fatted calf for me, or killed the goat for me, the business was over. It was a naive form of generosity. I couldn't fault her generosity, but I had huge questions about her business savvy. And she was not gifted or called to run any kind of business enterprise. She just didn't have that mindset. The Bible here sets out to me that it is okay to recognise that until you have made safe your core responsibilities to support your family, and that is not an abundant life, that's not 3 cars, 2 aeroplanes and X number of houses. This is the basics. But the point is, until your business is secure and safe also, it would be inappropriate to be just giving money away all the time. You are basically stopping the growth of your business. And the point is, as I said to you yesterday, this year my company was able to give away more than I earned in my entire first year of trading, which is amazing. I couldn't believe it. But that is because the business is up here, not down here still. So it's taking that kind of long view. If this is your calling and you really are honouring God and you're faithful and it's not that you're not generous, it's just that you are wise, then God can cope with that and can allow you that time to build up your business, but just make sure you do follow through. And this is a lady who's generous. Her heart of generosity is evident at the very beginning because she supports her servant girls as well as her own family. It's not that she's not generous, it's just that she's shrewd and wise. So she's now giving to the poor. This is definitely part of her, if you like, how a business begins to become a ministry and starts to help beyond her own family. So then we see in verse 21. Okay, 2 things here. One is economic prosperity is an amazing thing. One of the most important things in life is to have peace and to have a sense of peace about your future and about your family's future. There's nothing worse than anxiety, to eat away at the heart of people. And in this passage we see that the threat of snow holds no fear for her and her household. They are well provided for. We also sense here that she's now in the business of producing clothes, not just the raw material. So in business terms, she's moving up the food chain. She's gone from being a low-level business at the bottom of the food chain to moving up the food scale. So in my analogy, in say farming, that would be going from being someone who just grows crops and sells them to someone else to the person who processes those crops and turns them into a product. And then ideally, the person who even further up the food chain is the person who then sells those products and who has a brand and who then trades on that brand. So she's moving up the business food chain here. By investing in machinery, she's now able to produce clothes. But what's really interesting as well is her family are not just clothed in any old rags. This family are clothed in scarlet. She enjoys the produce of her own labour, and she doesn't have a problem with enjoying an element of, luxury is the wrong word, but just enjoying an element of prosperity. She doesn't have a problem with that. She's not extravagant in it. She's given to the poor first. The sequence is right, but she's not uncomfortable with wearing scarlet. And you'll see later on that she's not even uncomfortable in wearing purple, which is even bigger and even grander, and we'll look at that in a moment. So there's a sense of a kind of comfortable, peaceful life here that is well provided for and is free of fear. 22. Okay, so she's gone up the food chain even higher. Now, purple is the colour of kings. Purple is the finest, if you think about Lydia. So this lady, in some sense, is very similar to Lydia in the New Testament. She was a trader in purple cloth, and she was a very prosperous lady. And it's a very interesting kind of character comparisons. But nonetheless, this shows that she is now in the finest of clothes. The bottom line is, business people, if you look around and think of the business people you know, they're probably the people you think of as being the people who have a reasonably comfortable life. Because the bottom line is, a business run well starts to generate so much surplus that actually you can have a good life and still give away 10 times more than you ever dreamed of. You know, and some of that staying in your life is not inappropriate. It's in a sense, it's sharing in the plunder of the adventure. So we see that she's not uncomfortable in her life, and in a sense, she's not a person who's afraid of that. And then what do we see? So now here's a really interesting moment. Her husband is about to reappear in the story. What has he been up to? in this entire process, while she's been busy building a business and providing for them. Verse 23. How interesting. Her husband has been released into his ministry because of her business. Business is absolutely essential to releasing other people in the kingdom of God into ministry. We are, as business leaders, part of the food chain. We're one of the providers. We're one of the people that makes it possible for everyone else to be in ministry. So all those people that we've been thinking of as having the hierarchically top ministries, well, let's just remind them all, they're there because we're in business. All money comes back to business. Every single penny anyone's ever given away comes back to their employer, comes back to the job they work in, comes back to a business venture, comes back to a prosperous economic activity. That money doesn't grow on trees, and yes, you inherited it and gave it all away, still the person you inherited it off probably had a business, and if it wasn't them, it was their parents. Somewhere, every penny that was ever created on this earth has come through business ventures, business activity. And this man is released to he's respected at the city gate. And the city gate, if you remember the story of Ruth, that was where Boaz did the deal on the marriage. That's where the shoe was taken off and the transaction was done. The city gate, if you like, is the place where justice was established, where the elders of the land took their seat. And he's become a person of influence in the city. He's in a sense a politician, if you like. He's a person of authority in that town. And you can't just sit at the city gate and make money, and yes, you are what? How do politicians make money? Most of the time, it seems, sadly. Some of them get paid a salary, but most of them aren't content with their salary. So they use their position of power to do what? Cut deals. So a bad elder at the city gate, one who was perhaps not so well respected, would be the one who says, you want to bring those produce into our city, I want a cut. So when you come into my town, little backhander, bit of backsheesh, let me have 10% of that produce you've got, and then you can come into my town. This elder is respected. That suggests he has some integrity, and the reason he's free to be a respected elder is because he's not in any need of any money. His wife has provided through their business for all of his financial needs. We know he lacks nothing good. Why would he need to do corruption? He's well provided for. So business has provided for those in ministry, other forms of ministry that are perhaps more servant-oriented or more socially oriented, to do so without corruption and to be free because they're well provided for out of the surplus of this business venture. Okay. Verse 24. Okay, so now, again, what I love about this story is you keep getting a verse to do with her business and then a verse to do with her life, and then a verse to do with her business and a verse to do with her life. So now we're back into her business again. She's moving up the food chain again. She's not just selling at the local market anymore. She's now trading with merchants. And not only that, in my version it says, and supplies the merchants with sashes. Her produce is so good, the merchants don't just sell it to other people, they choose to wear her clothes. That means they're the best. So she's producing really high quality produce and she's trading far and wide. So her business has gone from a domestic business for very, very micro business, has become, if you like, a local business and is now becoming an international trading business. She's going up the food chain. Okay, the next verse, 25. This just reminds us of that sense of true prosperity. This is rooted in her character. She's not someone who's just wealthy in material terms. She's clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She has the most valuable thing in the world, peace about the future, no anxiety. And one thing that business, and I've seen it in India, it has this amazing ability to lift people up out of poverty and to lift them up out of desperation into a place of peace. And that is true prosperity. Peace and prosperity, the Bible says we should pray for. Business is part of delivering not just the prosperity, but also the peace. Because you need to have some prosperity to have true peace. Because without it, you are full of anxiety. Okay, 26. Now, she's very cleverly starting to think about the future and think about succession. So when you've been in business a little while, you suddenly shift from being someone who is just trying to make sure that your business survives and prospers to someone who now is able to start thinking about taking your experience and sharing it with others. You start to become someone who has a responsibility beyond yourself to start to equip the next generation. So she may be thinking about succession. She may be thinking about equipping people in her family to take on her business. She may be thinking about passing on her skills to the next generation. But the point is here, she is thinking about instructing other people. And she's gained wisdom. She has the wisdom to teach. She's learnt some things along the way in this business venture. So if you like, if her business was a ministry, the first thing we saw was she provided for her family. That to me is a very legitimate thing. That's a really important thing in life. She provides for the poor. That's a really legitimate ministry. She releases her husband into his ministry. That's a legitimate ministry. And we see here that she's in the business of training and education and instruction. That's also a legitimate ministry. So this woman's now got 4 ministries coming out of this one business venture. Or this life that revolves around this clothing business that she's in, which is amazing. Then 27. Oh, again, hard work's back again. Every 3 or 4 verses, we're just reminded, you want to prosper in business, never give up the hard work. Even when she's this successful, at the absolute top of her game, she still does not take on the bread of idleness. She's still busy, and she still has not forgotten her primary responsibility. She watches over the affairs of her household. You know, how busy must this woman be? She's involved in this growing business, she's dealing with international trade, she's releasing people into various things, she's doing training and teaching, but she's not forgotten that she still has responsibilities at home. She's still a wife, and she's still a mother, and she has to look after her household and her servants. And so those very first responsibilities haven't gone away. She's just added new responsibilities on top of them. And this is a wonderful thing. There are very few people who succeed in business who have this next verse said of them. Very few. What does verse 28 say? So in my verse it says, her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. Wow. How many people can succeed in business and their children not hate them? I mean, I may say that rather glibly, but boy, there are very, very few people who've been successful in business and not had their children say, when did I ever see you, Father? Where were you all my childhood? Yeah, I'm really grateful you paid for my university. I'm really grateful for the free car, but I'd rather have had you. Now that's a really, really challenging thing. Okay. That one I find quite emotional.
Yeah.
Okay, 29. You know, that in a sense is a kind of concluding statement before we get on to one little extra bit. This is kind of saying, look, if you can pull off that kind of life, that's impressive. Now, this is a noble life. And not many people do this. Not many people manage to pull this off. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. That's interesting, isn't it? This seemingly, I mean, her life at the end of the day is just a fairly bog standard successful business life of a person who is virtuous and has good character. She's done some giving, she's done some providing, she's enjoyed some of the prosperity of her wealth, she's released her husband into what he wants to do, and there's nothing particularly dramatic about this story. She hasn't changed the world, she hasn't introduced a new medicine or invented something profound. She's just lived what I would think of as the most normal of lives. But she's done so in a godly way. And as a result of that, she's considered to have surpassed them all. And there's something to be celebrated about just living the normal life. And what does the New Testament say about that? You know, work humbly with your hands. And there's a verse that says, I think it's in Thessalonians, but it talks about, there's a kind of sense of humble working, of just working with your hands. And that is satisfactory, that is enough. So we don't have to have dreams of grandeur. We can achieve amazing things through a very normal life. And then we see some really important sort of extra pieces here. So in verse 30, so really important. We discover here that this journey has not happened because she's just a person of good character. This journey has happened because she's a person who fears the Lord. the Lord is put into the heart of this story at the end, but there's a sense here that the Lord runs through this story. This is someone who's got character because of her walk with the Lord. And also, really importantly, she hasn't used the world's way of achieving success. She could have fluttered her eyelids at these various merchants, done deals with all sorts of people, and this gives the impression she was obviously a beautiful lady. She could have used that as the basis on which she succeeded. But actually she doesn't use that. She just uses her administrative wisdom, her character, and her godliness, and her faithfulness, and those things bring her success. And then finally we see the kind of pinnacle of the story. Verse 31. Okay, so first of all, it's not inappropriate that she enjoys the reward she has earned. But what reward are we really talking about here? You see, she takes her seat at the city gate. Well, at the kind of basic level, you could say, wow, this is amazing. In that time in history, for a woman to take her seat at the city gate was profound. This career of business has unlocked or has released her in society. It's raised her up in society. And now she takes her seat at the city gate. That's a place amongst the elders. That's a place amongst all the blokes who were sat at the gate ruling the town. So just in a worldly sense, this career of business has lifted her up in the respect of her peers and of the men of the city and of the people of influence and power. I can tell you from experience, a successful career in business puts you in a position of significant influence amongst the people of significant influence. So I am regularly in conversations with politicians. Politicians in my city ring me up and want my advice about things. They ask me to speak at things. They ask my opinion on things. It's early days, but that's the beginning of influence. So in a kind of purely practical sense, a successful career in business can put you into a position of influence and authority and gains you the respect of people of power in your community. But I would like to suggest that there is a more significant city gate being talked about here. Her reward is in heaven. She will take her seat. She will go through that gate. Let her works bring her praise at the city gate. When Peter stands at the gate and says, who's coming in? How nice to receive praise. Not just, oh, you're in by the skin of your teeth. But, wow, you're an amazing life. It's so good to see you here finally. Brilliant. Oh, we just love what you've been doing. We've been watching with such excitement, all the things you've done. Brilliant. Let me show you some other people. This is so-and-so. Look at what they've done. It's great to have them here. Finally, they're here. They've got such a great story to tell. Come and hear their story. Now, that's an amazing thing to receive praise at the city gate. And I do believe that actually a career in business is a perfectly humble career in business, just doing what seemingly is a normal life, can bring the ultimate reward, God's approval, a welcome at the city gate in heaven. That ultimately is what ministry does. It brings you true treasure in heaven. It is ultimately the fulfilling of a proper Christian life, bearing fruitfulness and making a difference for the kingdom of God. So contained in that passage is the most phenomenal unpacking of a perfect business work-life balance. If we can attain even a part of the measure of that in what is seemingly a very humble life, man, we would have lived a very successful life and we would have made a real difference in the world. But don't be discontent with making a difference just in your family, in your community. You don't have to change the world to be making a difference for the kingdom of God. And I do believe it's a work of God that God is pleased with, and there is a just reward at the end of it.